If your website is taking longer than 3 seconds to load, there's a good chance you're losing out on about half the people coming to your website who are just hitting the back button because it's too slow. So let's talk about how to optimize your WordPress website such that it loads in under 3 seconds. Have you ever done a search on Google and found a website that looked really interesting, but when you clicked on it, it just sat there loading for like 10, 15, 20 seconds, just a blank white screen? Well, do you know what happens when most people experience that issue? They just hit the back button and they leave that website and go find one that's actually going to load in a decent amount of time. In fact, there was a study done by Google where they found that 50% of mobile users hit the back button if a website does not load within 3 seconds. So if your website is loading slowly, then about half of the people that would have ended up on your website are just going to hit the back button and end up working with one of your competitors, which we don't want that to happen, especially with all the work you've put into optimizing your website. You don't want it to just completely bomb because it's not loading fast enough. So to prevent that from happening, I'm going to show you how to optimize the pages of your website such that they load in under 3 seconds so that you can acquire more visitors. All right, let's get into it.
Now there are a few different key elements that make up page load speed, which we're going to touch on briefly, but before I show you how to optimize each point, the first thing to consider is your web server. This is the actual location where your website lives, and it's basically just a computer that's built to load up websites. Now if that computer, aka your server, is really old and just not great quality, then it's going to be like trying to watch an HD video on a Windows 98 computer. It's going to be really slow and no one's ever going to have a good experience on your website. So it's really important to host your website on an up-to-date server that has the capacity to load your website quickly. In addition to your server, there's something called caching, which is where your web server takes copies of the pages that you load and saves them on a server as well as on your computer to speed up the load times. So without getting too deep into how things work, basically caching is just a way of speeding up the load time of the pages on your website by compressing the information in the pages into a form that loads much more quickly as compared to without caching. And beyond caching, there's one other key element that can really slow down your website, which we need to address, and that is media. Now when I say media, I'm just talking about things like images, videos, and other forms of digital media that take up a lot of resources when loading a web page. Images are typically going to be the main thing that you want to focus on, unless of course you have a lot of videos embedded on your website. But most images these days are really high resolution, which makes the files really large. So to load a web page with 5 or 10 large images is really going to slow down your website. So to prevent that from happening, we want to optimize the size of the images on your website to reduce the server load and ultimately speed up the load time of the web pages on your site. Now if you aren't a really techie person and you'd prefer to just have somebody optimize your website for speed, then don't worry because we do offer this as a service, and you can learn more by visiting the link down in the description. But if you want to go ahead and do this yourself, let me just show you exactly what you would need to do. Now the first point we were talking about in terms of optimizing your website load speed is making sure that your website is on a fast server. Now that's a little bit out of the context of showing you how to set that up on this video, but ultimately if you feel like your hosting provider is not sufficient, then you can check out some alternate hosting providers. InMotion Hosting is a great one to check out, but there's a whole bunch of different hosting providers out there that will work. Now once you have your website on a server that's going to be able to load your website quickly, then you are ready to start with the next 2 points, which is optimizing the caching and then the media or the images on the website. So the first thing we're going to start with is the actual caching. And there's a number of different ways to set up caching on a website. The server that this example website is on actually uses what's called Lightspeed cache. It's a particular type of server that this website's on, where this is built in. There are other options out there like WP Rocket, which will allow you to enable page caching on any website, no matter what server it's on. So you can check that out by visiting WP Rocket. But for this example, we're going to look at the Lightspeed cache, and most caching plugins will be set up pretty similar. So once you have the caching plugin installed, which actually happens automatically on this type of server, then we can actually start optimizing things. So there's a number of different settings in here. Actually, we want to start with the cache settings here. So we can see that we have the cache enabled, so you can toggle it on and off. And that's kind of how these caching plugins work, is you can just come through, figure out which things you want to turn on, and switch the button on. Like object cache is something we would want to use. So we'll switch object cache on. And then what you want to do is save the page, and then purge the cache. And then open the page up and just make sure everything loads properly. Sometimes when you implement one of the cache settings, it will technically break the website, so it'll look all weird and it won't look right. And if that happens, then you can just deactivate whichever option you activated that caused the issue. So it looks like object cache is working properly, so that's good there. We also want to turn on browser caching. So we'll save that. And then you can also purge the cache from the front end here. So we can just see that this loads properly and it looks like everything worked great. And then we can just keep moving on. So image optimization. Actually, I think we want to go down to page optimization now. So we'll want to turn on CSS minify as well as CSS combine, and load CSS asynchronously. Those will all help speed things up significantly. So then we'll save that, and then we'll purge the cache here. And now you'll start to notice some things looking a bit different. So see, when it loaded, it didn't load the CSS right away. So it didn't have styling until it loaded the CSS, and then it appeared. So what you can do, if that's something that you don't like the appearance of, then you can come back, switch the load asynchronously off, resave it, and then purge the cache again. And you'll see that it doesn't load. Yeah, see, it looks normal from the point that it loads. However, if you're wanting speed over it looking good, then you can leave that setting on. And then we'll come over to JavaScript settings. And JavaScript we want to minify as well, and we also want to combine it, and we want to load it deferred. So those are all basically going to help the page load before it spends a bunch of time trying to load JavaScript. And it's going to combine all the files into one file, so the server doesn't have to go look for all these different files, and it still looks like it's loading properly. So we'll keep going here. You can minify HTML and inline CSS and inline JavaScript, and we'll test those out as well. Okay, it looks like it's loading properly still. And just make sure there's not any other ones here. Nope, those are all good. Media settings, we can set it to lazy load images. And what that's going to do is it's going to only load the images that are within the viewport. So the images down the page aren't going to load until you actually start scrolling down the page. So when you switch this on, if you do have a pretty resource intensive website, the images can take some time to load. So if that is happening, you might want to switch that off. But it looks like it's working just fine for us here. So we'll leave that on. And we can combine CSS. Well, Yeah. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so that still looks fine. And you can do that for JavaScript as well. Again, if you're going through and you're switching things on and it's causing the site to load funny, then just go switch those settings off. So it's a bit of just testing to see, because it's going to vary depending on your website and the server that it's on and a whole bunch of different factors. And then we'll come over to the database. Now, most caching plugins will allow you to clean up your database. So all we would do is click on these options, and like for instance with post revisions, each time you change a page or a post on your website, it saves it in case you want to restore to the previous version of the page. But you don't really need to save, you know, hundreds of revisions. If you have loads of revisions in there, you can just clear them out. And same thing with, you know, this is pretty well optimized. So you just click these different settings and it's going to optimize your database for you. And then that's pretty much it. Okay, so now what we want to do is test the load speed of the site to just see where it is. So I went ahead and did the test before we started optimizing the cache. So you can see it was taking 4.3 seconds to load. And then we can just click retest. And then it's going to go through and retest those pages so that we can see what the new page load speed is. So the whole idea is to do a test at the start of optimizing your page load speed so that you can see where it clocks at to start with. And then as you go through and optimize the cache and the images and everything else on the website, you can then test it again and make sure that it is improving. So you can see now it's loading in 3.1 seconds. So we shaved off a second. You know, when we optimize the images and other things, we'll be able to shave off even more time and get this loading even faster. So let's go ahead and take a look at optimizing the images on the website. Now on this website we just have example images that are in here, but there's two different ways of optimizing the images on the website. One way is to do it manually with a tool like resizeimage.net. And to do that, all you do is open up resizeimage.net and then upload the image that you want to resize. It's going to upload it. And then we can change the size of the image. So we might not need a full 1000 pixel wide image. You know, a general website width is going to be about 1300 pixels. So if this was a smaller image, which it is, it's just being used in this section right here. So we could reduce it down to maybe 600 pixels, which you can see shaves off quite a bit of the size right there. And then even more importantly, you just want to click normal compression and then change this to 90% and then click resize. Now you can see it took the image from 45 kilobytes down to 7. So great reduction in size for that image. And then you can click view image and make sure it looks fine, which it does. And then you can just download the image and then upload it back into your website. Now if you don't want to go through and do this manually for all the images on your website, like say you have thousands of images that need optimized, then what you can do is use an image optimization plugin. So we'll come back into the back end of WordPress and we'll click add new plugin. And the plugin that we're looking for is called ShortPixel. And we'll see a number of results show up, and ShortPixel Image Optimizer is the one we're looking for. It's created by ShortPixel. So we'll just click install. And then that's going to download the image or the files for that plugin to your actual website. Okay, so now that that's installed, we just need to click activate, and then it's going to go ahead and activate that plugin. Now, the settings for ShortPixel are in the settings section, so we'll just navigate over here to ShortPixel. And you'll need to enter in an API key. So this is a paid service. You pay per image that you optimize. So that's why we showed you how to optimize images manually. In case you don't want to pay, then you can just do it manually. But if you have a lot of images and you prefer to just pay $5 or $10 to have them optimized, then you can just use the short pixel plugin. So once you have this set up with your API key inserted, then you just want to scroll down here and click a maximum size, and typically I'll just do something like 1300 by 1300 since that's about the width of a typical website. So what that means is if there's a huge image in here that's 5,000 pixels wide, it's gonna crop it down to 1300 pixels, which will save a lot of space and won't really compromise the quality of the image. But we don't want it to cut part of the image out. We just want it to basically reduce the size so that it's at a max of 1300 by 1300 pixels. So to do that, you just click this second option. And then all you do from there is click Save and go to Bulk Processing. And then it's going to tell you how many images there are to resize. So we have 50 original images, and then each of those images is saved at different sizes depending on where it loads on the website. So those are the smaller thumbnails that you see here. There's 210 of them. So if we click Start Optimize, it's going to use 260 image credits. Keep in mind you do get 100 free credits per month, so if you only had a few images, you could potentially use this for free to optimize your images. So then once you're done optimizing all of your images, then you would just want to come back to GTmetrix test tool and retest and see exactly how fast your website is loading with all the images optimized and the caching set up properly and having your website on a good hosting server. So between those three things, your hosting server, your images, and your caching, if you get those set up properly, I guarantee you you're going to improve the page load speed on your website drastically, which will ultimately just improve the user experience and result in more and more sales for your business.
Hey, thanks so much for sticking around to the end of this episode. I hope that you got a lot of value out of it. If you did enjoy this content, then make sure to tune in to the next episode where we're going to show you how to set up automated email marketing so that you can nurture the leads that you're getting through your website and convert them into actual sales. All right, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.